All right, let's begin. Let's start talking about things. Oh Jesus, I am tired, man. Stretch. I'm gonna have to exercise after stream. So things have remained largely unchanged as far as the reality on the ground goes in Palestine, Israel-Palestine conflict and all that. I've been reading the news updates periodically from Al Jazeera, and it seems that it's still like the evacuation order for the North Gaza area is still in effect. Many Palestinians have been hurt or killed on the way out. They still don't have any electricity or water in the south, even though the United States got Israel to sort of performatively agree to allow water into the south of Gaza. Really, it doesn't mean much because all of the means by which you would transport water into the cities down there are more or less destroyed. You know, pipes have been damaged and all that. It's not good. But there's one thing that I want to focus on that's actually outside of Palestine today that has to do with that situation, which is public opinion. It's a fickle thing. It can be a fickle thing. Just look at what the world did after 9/11. Like, unironically, I think 9/11 set us back decades in terms of the advancement of, like, the dialectic or the progression of politics as far as the Western response was concerned. If you look at 9/11 from an objective perspective, it's just a terror attack. It's a really bad terror attack, but it's just a terror attack. It's nothing to do an entire, like, national or global scale reactionism, trend in government over. But this time, it seems that actually hasn't happened. Granted, a lot of people in Israel have been looking at the attacks from Hamas in the Gaza Strip as a sort of 9/11 analog. But they've actually been, the public in Israel, because we've sort of done this song and dance before, I think, they're being a little bit smarter about it. If people are realizing, now hold on a minute, this only happened because of some severe security failures on the part of Netanyahu's government, which I outlined that I think he actually wanted the Hamas to attack because he's evil and wanted an excuse to kill more Palestinians. But you could also make the argument, I guess, that it was just sloppy intelligence. Regardless, people have recognized the attack for what it was, which is a critical failing of the security apparatus in Israel. Israel has such a disproportionate amount of resources relative to Hamas that if competent individuals were at the wheel, this would not have happened. And so they are placing the blame more and more on Netanyahu. Even within Israel, which is kind of, it is hope-inducing, but there's also, like, the world around, there have been protests, massive protests. The rest of the world did not react to this as though it were some sort of 9/11-esque event, because I think the rest of the world had a pretty bad impression to start with regarding Israel, or at least were, like, kind of lukewarm, if they weren't, very sour on it. So, in various major cities in the United States, Seattle, LA, New York, DC, Chicago, San Francisco, I think, as well, maybe San Diego, is one of the San cities in California, and maybe even both of them, as well as various cities in Europe, Berlin, Paris, I think Munich as well. Munich was one of the cities that did that had a protest. A lot of people have been demonstrating for Palestine in solidarity with the Palestinian people because of the genocide they are currently being subjected to. But the governments of the world didn't like that very much. I'm sure the United States doesn't like it very much either, or I guess the U.S. is going to react how the U.S. is going to react. I'll get into that a little bit later. But the governments of Europe really didn't like that. To such an extent that France is one country that did this. France bans all pro-Palestinian protests. Headline from CNN World. Here we go. In Paris, hundreds of demonstrators gathered in central Paris on Thursday. in defiance of a controversial new ban on pro-Palestinian rallies in the country. French police and members of the gendarmerie. Gendarme means man at arms, which is the French word for police. Members of the French police force worked to disperse the crowds with tear gas and water cannons. The ban had been announced earlier in the day. This was like a snap decision too, and they cited concerns of public order. Pro-Palestinian demonstrators must be prohibited because they are likely to generate disturbances to the public order, said the Interior Minister, Gérald Darmanin. He added that any organization of such protests will lead to arrests. Now, don't get me wrong, in countries where this kind of protest is not banned, you will still get arrested for going to this protest, for these kinds of protests. The difference is, in a country like the United States, which has not banned such protests because it is literally not allowed for you to ban protests like that, like you would face massive backlash. The police will arrest you, knowing that you have done nothing wrong or illegal, and then they will let you go because they can't charge you with anything. They can't impose legally any penalties on you, unless you're black, in which case they just beat you up or maybe shoot you. But that's a different story. In France, people have actually been getting fined over attending these protests, which is pretty out there to somebody like me. If I scroll down here we go. There was a demonstration in Place de la République. That's in Paris, I'm pretty sure. It's where the Arc de Triomphe is, I'm pretty sure. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've been to France. The ban on pro-Palestinian rallies is, quote, not normal under the rule of law, one attendee named Ryan told Reuters. Here we go. In France, the great country they say France is, you cannot demonstrate as is your right freely. Unfortunately, freedom is no longer here, and we are forced to defy French law, as one would say, and demonstrate to show the truth, he added. Another protester described the ban as a, quote, great injustice, and told Reuters that he had been fined 135 euros for wearing the keffiyeh, a traditional Palestinian scarf. I don't know if that's anything like hijab, but France is incredibly anti-Muslim. Like, so anti-Muslim. Like, it's pretty ridiculous. And so I'm sure the French government kind of jumped at the opportunity to ban these kinds of protests, especially because Macron is a massive dickhead. They didn't even use the, like, super easy excuse that they could have used if they just wanted to have, like, a thin veneer of legitimacy in doing so. I think Germany is one of the countries that did this. They cited anti-Semitism as the reason for banning pro-Palestine protests. They were like, yeah, any pro-Hamas groups are now banned. But, reading between lines, that basically means any pro-Palestinian protests are banned because they will simply read pro-Palestine as pro-Hamas, and they'll crack down on it anyway, and they'll use the law as their reasoning there. And since they get to define the law, they get to decide what's illegal, the governments of Europe and whatnot. If they decide that pro-Palestine means pro-Hamas, then that's what the law means in that case. If that makes sense. Yeah, it's not good. But at the same time, the fact that such protests have been erupting on a global scale, I think, is indicative of the solidarity that people are prepared to offer Palestine in times such as these. Which is good because in the United States, sometimes we get the impression, the very real impression for sure, that people are fucking psychotic. In America, there's like a lot of people that support Israel, and even if they support Palestine, they would put up the front that, like, well, I think Israel has a right to exist, but, and then they'll lay out their support for Palestine or whatever. Such is the effect of propaganda. You are not immune to propaganda, etc., etc. The governments of the world, including the United States, I want to really drive this home, do not give two shits about anti-Semitism. Hell, a lot of them are anti-Semitic. Germany is currently experiencing a far-right problem. Tell me where you've heard that one before. Especially in their police force, where a lot of cops recently have been caught sharing child sexual abuse material and also Nazi memorabilia, sometimes in the same string of chat logs. So they are both Nazis and pedophiles, sometimes all at once. So obviously that's not it. This is just, I think, a natural inclination of the state. Even a supposedly liberal, relatively hands-off state is that, you know, cracking down on protests like this. And they use whatever they can get as an excuse. However, the counter to that, the counter scenario to governments being very anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian, whatever, and banning certain protests, is that they're not going to be able to stop these protests, right? Like, there is a certain degree to which, if you're a government in Europe, like, you could intervene to break up certain events and you like potentially get away with it. But if protests grow so massive to the extent that they're occurring in every major city, there is a line, and if you cross that line, then it's going to make people only want to protest more, because now they are getting the message from the government that we are the oppressor and so is Israel. We support Israel's oppression so much that we will oppress you for trying to speak up against Israel. To my knowledge, the U.S. is one country that, funnily enough, doesn't do this, because I mean, like, free speech and such, free speech laws in the United States are much more accommodating of the general public than in Europe. Yeah, I don't think I have that much left to say about Palestine, actually. I think it's good that people are protesting, and I think it's good that not only public opinion, actually, this is one thing I want to mention as well. The news narrative has changed as well, considerably in the past few days. Usually from Western news outlets, from American news outlets especially, you get the most ridiculous headlines about, like, oh, Palestinian child dead in relation to rocket coming from direction of Israeli-owned jet, or some shit like that. They offload the responsibility of the killing in Palestine as much as possible to make it seem like basically civilians in Palestine are being killed by random acts of God. But recently, the news coverage has shifted from that, because initially they were going to these pro-Palestine. Yeah, Hamas murdered, Israel killed. Yeah. The news coverage in the United States, I remember seeing several local news channels basically being parodies of themselves by like going to pro-Palestine rallies and only picking out the people that would say, like, well, you know, I think Israel has a right to exist, but and then, you know, they would look for somebody else that would say, like, yeah, well, you know, what Hamas is doing is bad, but blah blah blah, and they would like cut it there. Now they're actually giving a lot more airtime to people in these protests, like, not even challenging them when they say stuff like, yeah, Israel's an apartheid state and that's terrible and Palestinians don't deserve this, and stuff like that. If there's anything that gives me the slightest bit of hope that this could eventually, like, change for the positive, it would be that. Because at the end of the day, like, even though public opinion is not the major driving force upon which policy gets made, it is still a force to be reckoned with in politics. And if there's so much public support, but also active public support for a certain international relations policy or domestic policy or whatever, the government is going to have to take note of that, because if they don't deliver on something that people feel so animated about, they will lose political capital, and that could affect them negatively in the future. But again, that's me being hopeful. I will see how this all plays out in the coming few days, in the coming weeks, and you know, things still don't look good. There might be a light at the end of the tunnel, but we're still pretty deep in that tunnel. And that's the segment. I'll end it there.